If you've ever looked at a law, ethics, and systems question on the evaluating exam and felt your stomach drop, you're not alone. Most candidates study pharmacology hard, but leave this section to the last minute. Big mistake. Under the current blueprint, this area tests real, practical judgment, legislation, patient rights, professional accountability. Get it wrong, and it costs you. So let's fix that right now. In the next few minutes, we're going to walk through the core concepts, work through realistic scenarios, and I'll show you the exact mistakes that trip candidates up and how to avoid them. Here's something most candidates get backwards. They treat law, ethics, and systems as a memorization task. Just learn the rules, pick the matching answer. But the exam is testing whether you can think like a licensed pharmacist. That means understanding the intent behind the legislation, not just the letter of it. When two answer choices both sound professional, the one that best reflects patient-centered care, scope of practice, and accountability principles is almost always correct. So our goal in this video isn't to hand you a list to memorize. It's to build a mental framework you can actually use under pressure. Canada's drug law operates on two levels, and the exam loves to test whether you know which level applies. Federally, the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act governs how narcotics and controlled substances are handled, scheduling, record-keeping, reporting requirements. The Food and Drugs Act covers drug approval and labeling. Provincially, your Pharmacy Practice Act sets out scope of practice, who can do what, and how pharmacists are regulated. When a question involves a pharmacist's license or scope, think provincial. When it involves a Schedule I narcotic or a drug recall, think federal. Overlap zones, like prescribing authority for pharmacists, are tested heavily because the answer genuinely depends on which province the scenario is set in. Controlled substance questions almost always hinge on one of three obligations: prescription requirements, record-keeping, or reporting. For Schedule I narcotics, a written signed prescription is typically required. A verbal order over the phone is not acceptable in most circumstances, and the exam will test whether you know that. Record-keeping means every receipt and distribution is logged accurately. If there's a discrepancy, you investigate it. You don't just correct the number and move on. And if controlled substances go missing, reporting to Health Canada is mandatory, not optional. Candidates who miss these questions usually pick the answer that sounds reasonable instead of the one that reflects the actual legal obligation. Informed consent is one of those topics that sounds simple until you hit a scenario with a twist. The core principle is that a capable patient has the right to accept or refuse any treatment, including medication, as long as they understand what they're deciding. Your job as a pharmacist is to ensure that understanding exists. The exam will test this in tricky ways. A patient who initially consented but now seems hesitant, a patient whose capacity is in question, or a situation where a family member is pressuring a decision. Remember, capacity is decision-specific and can fluctuate. When a patient lacks capacity, there's a legal hierarchy for substitute decision-makers, and overriding that hierarchy, even with good intentions, is a professional and legal problem. Confidentiality questions on the exam follow a predictable pattern. They'll give you a scenario where there's pressure to share patient information, and you have to decide whether that pressure is legally or ethically sufficient. The default answer is always to protect the information. But there are real exceptions. If a patient poses an imminent, serious risk to themselves or someone else, disclosure may be not only permitted but required. Mandatory reporting obligations, like certain communicable diseases or child abuse, override patient consent. A court order compels disclosure. Outside of those exceptions, even a patient's family doesn't have automatic access to their health information. When you do disclose, document why. That documentation protects both the patient and you. This is one of those areas where exam questions feel almost uncomfortably realistic. A scenario might describe a pharmacist who recommends a product from a company that sponsors their continuing education. Is that a conflict of interest? Almost certainly yes. or a pharmacist whose close friend is now their patient. The exam wants to know whether you recognize the boundary risk and whether you respond appropriately. Conflicts of interest aren't always about money. They include any situation where a personal interest could compromise your professional judgment. The correct answer usually involves transparency, disclosing the conflict, taking steps to manage it, and prioritizing the patient's well-being over any other consideration. You don't need a philosophy degree to answer ethics questions, but you do need a consistent framework. The 4 principles, autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice, are your anchors. When 2 principles conflict in a scenario, the exam is testing which one takes priority in that specific context. For example, a patient's autonomy to refuse a medication might conflict with your concern for their safety. Under the current blueprint, health equity is explicitly included, so expect scenarios involving barriers to access, culturally safe care, and systemic disparities. The question won't always use the word equity. It might describe a patient who can't afford their medication or who faces language barriers. Recognize the equity issue and respond to it. Healthcare systems questions often feel abstract, but the exam anchors them in practical pharmacy scenarios. The key mental shift is this. When a medication error occurs, the first question isn't who made the mistake. It's what in the system allowed this to happen. That's the foundation of patient safety culture. Near-miss events, errors that were caught before reaching the patient, are especially important to report because they reveal vulnerabilities before someone gets hurt. A just culture means you hold people accountable for reckless behavior, but you don't punish honest mistakes made within a flawed system. Candidates who understand this distinction score much better on questions about error reporting, disclosure, and quality improvement. Let's talk about the mistakes that cost marks. Number 1, the compassionate-sounding answer. The exam will give you an answer choice that feels warm and patient-friendly, but actually bypasses a legal obligation. If a patient asks you not to record a controlled substance dispensing, the compassionate instinct might be to accommodate them, but legally you can't. Number 2, jurisdiction confusion. Always establish whether the scenario is a federal or provincial matter before picking an answer. Number 3, permitted versus required. Disclosing to prevent harm may be permitted, but is it required? Those are different answers. And number 4, the patient told you what they want. Don't override it because a family member disagrees or because you think you know better. Autonomy is not a suggestion. That's a wrap on law, ethics, and systems. And honestly, if you work through those 8 concepts until they feel automatic, you're going to be in a much stronger position on exam day. But watching a video is just the start. We've built a detailed study guide and original practice question bank specifically for this topic area. It goes deeper on every concept we covered today, with worked scenarios and answer rationales. You can find it on our Etsy shop, AI Universe CA. The link is in the description below and in the pinned comment. Got a question about anything we covered or a scenario you're not sure how to approach? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want to be the first to know when we drop the next topic video, hit subscribe and the bell. Good luck out there. You've got this. If this helped, check out these other PEBCBuddy videos to keep your prep going.